I opened Dad's war letter 27 years late and felt my knees buckle. "Please, God, don't let it say what I think it does," I whispered, my 38-year-old hand shaking over the yellowed envelope postmarked 1945. I slid it open with Mom's butter knife, unfolded the single sheet, and my heart stopped. What was written inside made me tremble in a way I had never felt in all my years of missing him. But let me take you back to that quiet Tuesday afternoon in 1972, how a simple knock from the mailman turned 27 years of grief into the most shattering moment of my life. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Old Timer Stories. I'm Julian, your narrator. On my channel, I release one nostalgic story every single day from the 1940s to the 1970s. Here, one memory can last a lifetime. Before we continue, where were you in 1972? Let everyone know in the comments below. The story continues in 3, 2, 1. It was 3:17 p.m. on a Tuesday in 1972. I know the exact minute because I just glanced at Mom's kitchen clock while rinsing my coffee cup. Tuesdays were bingo nights, so the house was quiet, too quiet, without her clattering around with her lucky dauber and purse. I was 38, wiping down the counter after lunch, humming an old hymn to fill the silence. The radio played low in the background, some crooner singing about lost love. Outside, the October sun painted the maple tree gold, the same tree Dad planted the year I was born. Everything felt ordinary, safe. Then the screen door creaked. Mr. Jenkins, our mailman for 20 years, stood there with his cap pushed back, holding a single yellowed envelope. "Tommy," he said, voice softer than usual, "this one's addressed to you." Looked old, his eyes lingered on the postmark before he handed it over and walked away without another word. My name, Tommy Carver, Jr., was scrawled across the front in Dad's handwriting, that slanted cursive I'd memorized from postcards sent during basic training, the ones with jokes about Army chow and promises to be home soon. Postmarked 1945, 27 years ago. My knees buckled. I grabbed the counter to steady myself, the envelope trembling in my grip like it might explode. The rest of the mail, bills, a church flyer, sat forgotten on the table. Dad was dead. Presumed lost in 43. The telegram came in 46. Missing in action? Presumed dead? We'd buried an empty coffin, laid daisies on his grave every Memorial Day. I was 9 when the leaves turned and he never came back. "Please, God," I whispered, my voice cracking like thin ice, "don't let this be what I think it is." I sank into the chair at the oak table, the one Dad carved his initials into at 16, BC plus RC. Him and Mom, young and foolish in love. I still trace those letters when the nights got too heavy. The envelope sat in front of me like a loaded gun. I didn't want to open it, wanted to tear it up, wanted to pretend Mr. Jenkins had never knocked, because if it was the Army confirming they'd found his body, if it was proof he'd suffered all those years ago, or worse, if it was nothing at all, then the fragile hope I'd carried since I was 9 would shatter. But my hands didn't listen. I grabbed Mom's butter knife, the one with the chipped pearl handle used for birthday cakes and Sunday roasts, and slid it under the flap. The paper cracked like dry leaves. The glue gave way with a soft rip. Inside was one sheet, folded twice. Dad's stationery, eagle stamp in the corner, the kind he bought before shipping out. I unfolded it slow, my breath caught. Dear Ruth and Tommy, if this ever finds you, know I tried. The camp was hell. We escaped in '44. I hid in barns, stole bread, walked at night. I wrote this from a Red Cross truck headed to the coast. I was coming home. Then the truck was hit. I woke up in a field hospital with no ID. They said I was John Doe. By the time I remembered my name, the war was over and you were gone. I looked. God help me, I looked. But the trail went cold. I started over. I'm sorry. Tell Tommy I tried. Love always, Dad. I read it once. My eyes burned. Read it again. The words blurred. Read it a third time, slower, fingers tracing every letter like it might vanish. My chest caved in. Not the sharp stab of the '46 telegram, but a slow, twisting ache that spread to my throat, my fingertips, the soles of my feet. Dad was alive, or had been, in 1945, 27 years ago. I pressed the letter to my face. It smelled like dust, old paper, and something faint. Gun oil, maybe, or the ghost of the hand-rolled cigarettes he smoked on the porch while teaching me constellations. I don't know how long I sat there, long enough for the pie to cool, long enough for the sun to slide across the linoleum and paint the table gold. The front door creaked. "Tommy, you home early?" Mom's voice, cheerful from bingo. I shoved the letter into my pocket so fast the paper tore. My hand shook like I'd touched a live wire. "In here," I called, voice cracking like a teenager's. Mom walked in, purse swinging, cheeks pink from the walk. She stopped when she saw my face. "Tommy, what's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied. The word tasted like ash. Just tired. She didn't believe me. Moms never do. But she let it go, hung her purse on the chair, started rinsing her dauber in the sink. I stood there with Dad's words burning a hole in my pocket. Should I tell her? Should I rip open the grave we'd tended for 27 years and say, he was alive, he wrote this, he looked for us? Or should I let her keep the peace she'd built on an empty coffin and a folded flag? I didn't know. All I knew was the letter was real. The postmark was real. The handwriting was real. And for the first time since I was 9, I didn't know if my father was dead, or if he was out there breathing, living a life without us, while we mourned a ghost who might still be calling my name. The clock ticked. Mom hummed. The letter waited. And in that moment, the world I'd known for 27 years cracked wide open, leaving me staring into an abyss of what-ifs that could destroy everything or give it all back. It was 4:42 p.m. on a gray October afternoon in 1946. I know the exact minute because I just glanced at Mom's kitchen clock while setting the table for supper. The little black hands ticked steady, same as always, but something in the air felt off, a heaviness that settled in my chest like a storm cloud I couldn't see. I was 12, barefoot in my jeans, humming along to the radio, some cheerful tune about soldiers marching home with roses in their rifles. Mom was at the stove, stirring gravy with her wooden spoon, the one Dad carved from a branch in the backyard before he left. Her apron was dusted with flour from the biscuits she'd rolled out on the counter, the house smelling like Sunday dinner, even though it was only Wednesday. "Dad's favorite," she'd said that morning, smiling like it was a secret between her and the pie cooling on the sill. Outside, The maple tree Dad planted the year I was born was turning red and gold, leaves drifting down like slow confetti in the wind that rattled the windows. The war was over. The neighbors' boys were coming home, Jimmy Harlan with a limp, Tommy Wilkins with a Purple Heart pinned to his jacket. Mom checked the mailbox every day, twice a day, her fingers crossed behind her back. Any day now, she'd whisper, like saying it out loud might jinx it. Dad's last letter had come in, 43. Hold the fort, Tommy boy, I'll be home before the leaves turn. They turned, then turned again and again. I set the forks down, tracing the carved letters with my finger. Everything felt like it might finally be okay. Dad would walk through the door any minute, boots muddy from the long walk home, grin wide as the sky, swinging me up in the air like I weighed nothing. Then the knock came, 3 sharp raps, like nails hammering into a coffin lid. Mom froze mid-stir. Gravy bubbled on the stove. "Tommy, door!" I hopped down, socks slipping on linoleum still warm from the oven. My stomach flipped for no reason. I swung the door open wide. A man in a crisp Western Union uniform stood on the porch, hat clutched in his white-gloved hands. His face was stone, eyes flat, mouth a thin line like he'd practiced this moment 100 times. "Mrs. Ruth Carver?" Mom came up behind me, flour streaked on her cheek, spatula dripping gravy onto the floor. "Yes?" The word came out small, scared. He handed her the yellow telegram. She took it like it was poisoned glass. I stood on tiptoes, heart hammering. "The Secretary of War desires me to express his deep regret that your husband, Private Benjamin Carver, has been reported missing in action since the 12th of March, 1944, and is presumed dead. Stop. No further details available at this time. Stop." Mom's knees gave out. Not a scream, a collapse. I lunged, caught her under the arms. She sagged, heavy, boneless, the weight of every unsent letter, every unanswered prayer, crashing down at once. "Mom!" My voice cracked like thin ice on the pond behind the house. She stared at the paper, didn't blink, didn't breathe. Her lips moved silently. "Ben, Ben, Ben." I dragged her inside, her slippers scraping the threshold. Gravy hissed on the stove, black smoke curling up to the ceiling like funeral incense. The radio kept singing, "Some Sunny Day," mocking us. I turned it off with a twist that nearly broke the knob. Silence swallowed the house whole. Mom sat on the couch, Dad's napping spot, the one with the patched arm where he'd fallen asleep reading the paper 100 times. The telegram was clenched in her fist, crumpled now, ink smudging from her tears. Her lips moved again. No sound. I read it a 3rd time, 4th time, the words burning into my brain. Presumed dead. The man in the uniform muttered, "I'm sorry, ma'am," tipped his hat, and left. His shoes crunched gravel like breaking bones as he walked away. I stood there, frozen, gravy burning, biscuits charring in the oven. Finally, I ran to the stove, yanked the pot off the burner. The spoon clattered to the floor. Smoke stung my eyes, or maybe it was tears. That night, she tucked me in like always, kissed my forehead with lips cold as the telegram paper. "Sleep tight, Tommy boy." But I heard her later, through the thin wall between our rooms. Sobs, soft at first, then ragged, endless, like a record stuck on the same broken note, spinning in the dark. I pressed my pillow over my ears, but I still heard every gasp, every "Ben," whispered to the empty room. Morning came gray and heavy. Her eyes were swollen shut, red-rimmed, but her chin was iron. She poured coffee with hands that didn't shake. "We're carvers," she said, voice steady as the oak table. "We carry on." We did. Supper, without Dad's booming laugh, filling the room. Bedtime without Treasure Island, read by a flashlight under the blanket fort we built in the living room. Sundays without his whistle while mowing the lawn, the smell of fresh-cut grass, and his aftershave. Mom quit writing the Army, quit asking the postman if there was anything official, quit saying Ben out loud like the name itself was a bruise she couldn't touch. But I didn't. I set an extra plate every night, fork and knife aligned. Perfect. Polished his medals in my sock drawer with an old rag until they gleamed like stars. Traced BC plus RC until the grooves wore smooth under my fingers. Every Memorial Day we drove to the cemetery in silence. Mom laid daisies on the empty grave. White, perfect, useless against the stone. I whispered to the headstone, "Come home, Dad, please." The wind took my words. Nothing came back but echoes. Years stacked like cordwood behind the shed. I grew up, tall, married Susan, had Lisa with Dad's blue eyes, and Tommy third with his stubborn chin, still set the extra plate. Now, 27 years later, Mom sat across from me at the kitchen table, tears drying on her cheeks from the letter she'd just read under the lamp. She'd gone out to the porch for air after the shock, come back in, and collapsed into the chair like the weight of two graves had finally caught her. The clock ticked past 3 a.m. She stared at the letter between us, Dad's words glowing yellow in the light. "I buried him," she whispered, voice raw. "Empty coffin, folded flag." I know. I stopped believing. I never did. She looked at me, eyes raw, fierce. "What do we do now, Tommy?" I didn't answer, because the telegram's ghost was awake again. Yellow paper in the cedar box upstairs. And this time, it wasn't bringing death. It was bringing life, late, cruel, undeniable. The gravy from long ago was just a memory burned into the curtains. The telegram slept upstairs, folded neat, but the red mailbox outside had delivered something new. And Mom's world, the one she'd rebuilt on presumed dead, was cracking wide open, piece by painful piece. She'd cried earlier, not loud or dramatic, but tears sliding down her cheeks into her coffee, silent and steady, the way rain runs down a window pane during a storm you didn't see coming. Then she'd gone out to the porch for air, leaving the back door open so the cool night rushed in, carrying the smell of cornfields and distant rain. I'd followed her, but she didn't speak, just stood on the steps with her arms wrapped around herself, staring at the red mailbox like it had betrayed her all over again. Now she was back inside, collapsed into the chair like the weight of two graves had finally caught her, her face pale in the lamplight, eyes fixed on Dad's handwriting, glowing yellow on the page. "He looked for us," she whispered, her voice raw from the crying, the words hanging in the air like smoke. "I know. He was alive." "I know, Mom." She folded the letter neat, too neat, the way she always did when she was trying to hold herself together, and laid it down on the table, her fingers lingering on the creases as if smoothing them could smooth out the years. "What do we do now, Tommy?" she asked, looking at me with eyes that were the same gray as Dad's, eyes that had seen too much loss and were now seeing too much life. I didn't answer right away, because I'd already done it, While she was on the porch staring into the dark, I'd slipped to the hall phone with my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake the neighbors, and I'd called the VA in a whisper, the woman on the line sighing through rustling papers before confirming what I'd feared and hoped in equal measure. They found him, I said finally, the words tasting like ash. Mom didn't breathe. Her hand froze halfway to her coffee cup. Florida, alive, remarried, 2 daughters. The words hung in the air, heavy and poison, filling the kitchen with a silence thicker than the gravy that had burned on the stove all those years ago. Mom's hand slipped from the table. She sat down slow, like her body was made of glass. Remarried? Yes. Daughters? Yes. She stared at the table, at the carved initials BC plus RC that Dad had etched when he was 16, and Mom scolded him for ruining her good wood, the grooves worn smooth from years of my fingers tracing them during lonely nights. Her voice was small, barely above a whisper. He forgot us. No. I pulled the letter closer, my fingers brushing hers. He looked. The trail went cold. Mom's eyes filled again, tears spilling over without permission. But he started over. He thought we were gone, I said, my own voice cracking now, the truth twisting in my chest like a knife. She stood up, walked to the sink, and stared out the window where the moon lit her face in silver lines, the same face that had smiled at me over birthday cakes and scolded me for tracking mud on her clean floor. I buried him, she whispered to the glass, her breath fogging it slightly. Empty coffin, folded flag, said the words over nothing. I know. I said the words over nothing. I know. She turned then, face wet but eyes fierce, the steel I'd seen the morning after the telegram rising up again. Take me to him. I didn't answer. Because I was going, at dawn, alone. I couldn't let her see him first. Couldn't let her heart break twice in one night when it had only just started to mend from the first crack. I'd go south, see if the man in Florida was really Dad, see if he remembered the smell of Mom's biscuits or the way she hummed off-key, see if he wanted us back after all these years. Then I'd bring her, or bury him again, this time for good. The clock ticked 4. Mom went to bed without another word, her light flicking off like a door closing on the past. I sat at the table, the letter in my pocket now, suitcase by the door packed quiet while she slept. I wrote a note on the pad by the phone. Going to visit Uncle Joe. Back in a week. Love, Tommy. A lie. But a kind one. The kind that protected her from the truth until I knew what the truth really was. I looked at the cedar box on Mom's dresser through the open door, the telegram inside folded neat, sleeping like it had for 27 years. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The truth was in my pocket, burning a hole through the fabric, and it was taking me south to a man who might still be breathing, who might still be Dad, who might still be the ghost we'd mourned or the father we'd lost. The clock ticked 5. I sat on the edge of my bed, suitcase packed with 2 shirts, a toothbrush, and Dad's old road map. Mom's light stayed off. I whispered to the dark, I'm sorry, Mom, but I have to know. The red mailbox outside waited in the pre-dawn gray, silent, patient, and the road south was calling, the engine of Susan's old Ford already warming in my mind, the miles stretching out like the years we'd lost. I was going to find him, even if it broke me, even if it broke us all. The night was cool. the crickets loud in the fields, the moon hanging low like it was watching. I closed my eyes and saw Dad's face, the one from the postcards, the one from the grave. Which one was real? I'd know soon. The clock ticked 6. Dawn was coming, painting the sky pink over the corn. I stood, grabbed the suitcase, the letter in my pocket like a heartbeat, Dad's words, Dad's promise. I walked to the door, paused one last time, looked back at Mom's room where she slept or pretended to. I whispered, "I'll bring him home, or I'll bring you peace." Then I stepped outside. The screen door creaked shut behind me. The red mailbox stood silent, and the road south waited, long and unforgiving, ready to give back what the war had taken or take it all away again. I was going to find him, even if it was the last thing I did. The road south was a ribbon of gray under a bruised sky, the kind of sky that promises rain but never quite delivers, leaving the air heavy and the horizon hazy. I left at dawn, before Mom woke, the note on the table a small white lie in the morning light. My suitcase rattled in the trunk of Susan's old Ford. Dad's road map spread across the passenger seat like a treasure chart from one of his old stories. The letter was in the glove box, folded neat. Dad's handwriting staring up at me every time I glanced over, a silent companion on this journey I never thought I'd take. I drove with the windows down at first, letting the wind whip my hair the way Dad used to, singing off-key to whatever was on the radio. But the radio stayed off today. I couldn't bear the cheer of some DJ talking about love songs when my heart was a knot of fear and hope. Coffee in a thermos, strong and black, a bag of Mom's oatmeal cookies for the road, crumbling in my hand as I ate one just to have something to do with my mouth besides whisper prayers I wasn't sure anyone was listening to. Ohio blurred past in the early light, cornfields golden and endless, barns with faded mail pouch ads that reminded me of Sunday drives with Dad when I was little, his hand on my knee as he pointed out the clouds shaped like animals. I crossed into Kentucky by noon, the hills rolling green under a sun that climbed high and hot, heat shimmering off the asphalt like a mirage. My hands gripped the wheel tight, knuckles white, the VA woman's voice echoing in my head. Florida, remarried, 2 daughters, half-sisters. The word tasted strange, like a foreign spice I wasn't sure I liked. I stopped at a diner in Tennessee for gas and a sandwich, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and a waitress who called everyone honey. Name tag Doris. She poured coffee without asking, her eyes kind behind cat-eye glasses. Long trip? She asked, refilling my cup before I could answer. Florida. She nodded, wiping the counter with a rag that smelled like lemon polish. Family? I hesitated, the sandwich sticking in my throat. Yes. She didn't press, just smiled and left me with my thoughts, which were a whirlwind of what-ifs that made the miles feel longer. Back on the road, the sun beat down merciless, the air thick with the smell of pine and hot tar. I rolled the window down again, let the wind whip my hair, and sang "You Are My Sunshine" in a voice that cracked on the high notes, the song Dad used to sing to me when thunderstorms scared me as a kid. Georgia by evening, peaches for sale on roadside stands with hand-painted signs. I bought a basket, ate one in the car, juice running down my chin like when I was 9, and Dad wiped it with his thumb, laughing and calling me his little peach. The memory hit hard, tears blurring the road ahead. Night fell in Alabama, stars popping out. one by one like old friends. I pulled into a motel with a flickering neon sign, vacancy, the room smelling like mothballs and old smoke, the bed sagging in the middle. I sat on it, letter in my lap, the paper soft from so many readings, read it again, under the dim bulb. Tell Tommy I tried. I was Tommy, and I cried then, quiet into the pillow, so the thin walls wouldn't carry it to the next room. Slept fitful, dreamed of Dad walking away down a long road, calling my name over his shoulder, his voice fading with every step. Woke at dawn, eyes gritty, heart heavy. Drove. Florida, by noon the next day, palm trees swaying in a breeze that smelled like salt and promise. The ocean glinted on the horizon, blue and endless. The first time I'd seen it since a family trip when I was 7, Dad carrying me on his shoulders through the waves. The address was a small white house with blue shutters, a swing on the porch creaking gently, flowers in the yard, hibiscus, bright red like fresh blood. I parked under a palm, sat in the car, hands shaking on the wheel. A woman came out, mid-40s, kind eyes, dark hair in a bun, wiping her hands on an apron. She saw me, frowned, then smiled, tentative. Can I help you? I got out, legs like jelly, the gravel crunching under my shoes like bones. I'm looking for Benjamin Carver. Her face changed, shock, then something softer, like recognition dawning slow. He's inside. Who are you? Tommy, his son. She gasped, hand to her mouth, eyes filling with tears she didn't try to hide. Tommy? I nodded, throat tight. She called over her shoulder, voice breaking, Ben, someone's here. Then he appeared in the doorway. Same eyes, same slanted smile, older, thinner, hair gone gray at the temples. But Dad, he stared, the screen door creaking open in his hand. Tommy? My voice broke, tears spilling before I could stop them. Daddy? He opened his arms wide, the way he did when I was 9, and scraped my knee on the porch steps. I fell into them, 27 years, melting in that hug, his smell of salt and Old Spice wrapping around me like a blanket I'd forgotten I missed. He was alive, breathing, here. I pulled back, looked at him, really looked. The lines around his eyes deeper, the hands rougher, but the same man who taught me to ride a bike and carve my initials next to his. You're alive, I whispered, touching his face like he might vanish. He nodded, tears in his eyes, holding my hands tight. I tried. I know. The woman, Clara, his wife, stood back, eyes wet but smiling soft. 2 girls peeked from the door. Emily, 16, with Dad's blue eyes. Sarah, 14, with his stubborn chin. My half-sisters. Dad took my hand, led me inside, the screen door creaking shut behind us like it was closing on the past. We sat on the porch swing, the one that groaned under our weight, the way the old one at home did. He told me everything, his voice steady but breaking on the hard parts. The camp, the escape through moonless nights, hiding in barns with rats for company, stealing bread to survive, the Red Cross truck that was supposed to take him home until the bomb hit and everything went black. I woke up with no name, he said, eyes distant. John Doe. Took months to remember. By then, the war was over. I searched every town, every phone book, every lead. You were gone. Mom had moved us after the telegram, changed our name to Carter to start fresh. To escape the pitying looks and the empty chair at supper, he'd given up, started over, met Clara in a diner where she waited tables and smiled at his bad jokes. Had the girls. But I never forgot, he said, squeezing my hand. Never. I showed him photos from my wallet, Lisa in her wedding dress, Tommy the Third with his first paycheck grin, his grandkids. He cried, held them like they were real, pressing them to his chest. Clara brought sweet tea, condensation dripping down the glasses. The girls sat close, curious. Emily asked, "Are you our brother?" I nodded, throat tight. Sarah hugged me sudden, her arms strong like Dad's. We talked until the sun set, painting the sky pink and orange over the palms. About the camp, the war, the years lost in a fog of searching and surviving. Dad held my hand the whole time, like he'd never let go again, his thumb tracing circles on my knuckles the way he did when I was little and scared of thunder. Night fell, stars popping out, one by one. I looked up, the North Star, same as always, guiding lost sailors home. Dad followed my gaze. "Still leads home," he whispered, voice thick. I smiled, tears falling free now. Home, after 27 years. The porch swing creaked under us. The ocean whispered in the distance, waves on sand. And for the first time since I was 9, I wasn't alone. Dad was here, alive, breathing. But then Clara's face changed, her eyes flicking past me toward the road. A car pulled up, slow, headlights off, engine rumbling low. A woman got out, dark hair blowing in the breeze, familiar walk, purse clutched tight. Mom. She'd followed me. Her eyes locked on Dad, standing there with his arm around me, the letter in her hand, and the world stopped, the air thick with 27 years of grief and ghosts. What happens when a wife meets the husband she buried 27 years ago, and the family he built without her? Dad froze on the porch swing, his hand still on mine, the warmth of our reunion turning to ice. Clara gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Emily and Sarah peeked from the door, their young faces wide with confusion and fear. "Ruth?" Dad whispered, his voice cracking like old wood under too much weight, the name hanging in the air like a prayer he'd said 1,000,000 times in the dark. Mom didn't move at first, her eyes locked on him like she was seeing a ghost rise from the grave we'd tended for 27 years, the one with daisies every Memorial Day. I stood up slow, my legs shaky from the drive and the shock. "Mom, how did you—" "The note," she said, her voice flat but edged with steel, the same tone she used when I was little and tried to lie about broken cookies. "Uncle Joe's? You think I'm a fool, Tommy?" She'd followed me, 3 days on the road, through rain and heat, her old Chevy trailing mine without me knowing, her grief turning to determination the moment she read my lie. She walked up the path, steps measured and deliberate, eyes never leaving Dad, the gravel crunching under her shoes like bones. Ben. One word, a lifetime in it. Love, loss, anger, disbelief. Dad stood, his knees buckling a little from age or the shock of seeing the woman he'd searched for across continents. He took a step down the porch, then another, his hand outstretched like he could touch the years between them. They met halfway in the yard, stood there inches apart, the air between them thick with everything unsaid. "Ruth," he said again, tears in his eyes, his voice breaking on her name. She slapped him, hard. The sound echoed off the palms sharp as a crack of thunder. "You were dead." He didn't flinch, just touched his cheek where her hand had landed, the red mark blooming like one of the hibiscus flowers. I tried. She slapped him again, harder this time, her palm connecting with a sound that made Clara wince. I buried you? Clara stepped forward from the porch, her voice soft but firm. Ben? Who is? Mom turned on her like a storm. Who are you? Clara straightened, her kind eyes steady despite the tears. His wife. Mom's face crumpled for a moment, the steel cracking, then hardened again into something fierce and unbreakable. Wife. The word hung heavy in the air, poison and truth. Dad reached for her again, his hand trembling. Ruth, let me explain. She backed away, her eyes wild now. Explain? 27 years. 27 years of empty chairs and extra plates and daisies on a grave that wasn't even yours. The girls came out then, Emily and Sarah, their young faces pale in the porch light. Emily. Dad, what's going on? Sarah. Who is she? Mom looked at them, really looked, and saw Dad's eyes in Emily's face, his stubborn chin in Sarah's, the features she'd mourned in her own child now staring back from strangers. Her voice broke, a sob escaping before she could stop it. Daughters. Dad nodded, tears streaming. Our girls. No, Clara said soft, stepping closer but not touching. Mine and Ben's. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, muffling a sound that was half sob, half laugh. Ours? Clara shook her head gently. Ben's and mine, for 20 years. Mom's knees buckled then, the fight going out of her like air from a punctured tire. I caught her, eased her to the porch steps where the wood was still warm from the day's sun. We sat, Mom between Dad and me, the three of us, a triangle of loss and life. Clara went inside with the girls, giving us space, the screen door creaking shut behind them. Dad talked, his voice low and steady at first, then breaking on the hard parts. The camp in 44, the escape under moonless skies, hiding in barns with rats for company, stealing bread to survive, the Red Cross truck that was supposed to take him home until the bomb hit and everything went black, waking up with no name, no memory, labeled John Doe in a field hospital. I looked for years, he said, his hand on Mom's knee now, she letting him this time. Every town, every phone book, every lead that promised a Carver family. You were gone, Mom whispered, her voice small in the growing dark. We moved after the telegram. Changed our name to Carter. Started over. I couldn't stay in that house with your ghost in every room. Dad's face twisted in pain, the lines deeper in the porch light. I never knew. Mom's tears fell again, silent. You started over. He nodded, looking at the house where Clara and the girls waited. Thought you were lost forever. She looked at him, really looked, seeing the man she'd loved and lost and found again, older but the same in the eyes. I waited every day, for nothing. They cried then, heads together on the steps, the hibiscus petals soft under us. Clara came out after a while, tea on a tray, the girls behind her with tentative smiles. Mom looked up, saw the family Dad had built in the space where she'd mourned. Her family, too? Or the one that replaced us? The sun had set completely now, stars popping out one by one. Dad held Mom's hand. The girls sat close. Emily asked, voice small, Are you our grandma? Mom's voice broke, but she smiled through the tears. If you'll have me. Sarah hugged her, sudden arms strong. We talked till midnight, the porch light buzzing soft, about the war and the years lost and the trail that went cold, but never broke Dad's heart. Bonds formed in the dark, awkward at first, like new shoes, but tender, real. But as the night deepened and the crickets grew loud, Mom's eyes grew distant, her hand slipping from Dad's. She whispered to me, voice low so only I heard, "How do I forgive 27 years?" I didn't answer, because forgiveness was one thing, a choice you make with your head and heart. But the letters, dozens of them, returned unread, were proof Dad had never stopped trying. And now, the family he'd built without us was pulling us in or pushing us out. The shoebox sat open on the table inside, letters spilling like ghosts in the lamplight, and the cliff we'd been teetering on since the yellow envelope arrived just got higher, the drop deeper, the wind stronger. What happens when a wife meets the husband she buried and the family he built while she waited alone? The stars blinked above. The swing creaked. The letters waited. And the truth, sharp as the slap Mom gave Dad, was only the beginning of the storm. The shoebox of letters sat on the porch table like a coffin. Dozens of them yellowed and returned, stamped addressee unknown, in red ink that looked like blood under the moonlight. Mom held one in her trembling hands. The ink faded, but the words still sharp. "I'm alive. I'm looking. Don't give up." The Florida night was thick with salt air and cricket song, the moon hanging low like it was listening to every heartbeat on the porch. We were all there, Dad, Mom, Clara, Emily, Sarah, me. The family scattered by war now crowded together on the swing and steps, the hibiscus bushes glowing red in the dark. Clara had brought more tea, but no one touched it, the glasses sweating in the heat. The girls sat close to Mom, their small hands on her knees, like they could hold her together if she fell apart again. Mom's tears had stopped after the slaps, her face stone now, eyes fixed on the letters like they might bite if she looked away. Dad reached for her hand again, his voice soft. "Ruth?" She pulled away sharp. "Don't!" The word cut like a blade through the humid air. Dad flinched, his hand dropping to his lap. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She didn't try to hide. Emily whispered, "Mom," to Clara, who shook her head, gentle, "Not now." I sat frozen on the step, the weight of 27 years crushing the air from my lungs, the hibiscus petals soft under my fingers where I gripped the wood. Mom stood slow, walked to the porch rail, and stared at the hibiscus bushes, the red blooms glowing like fresh wounds in the moonlight. "I waited," she said to the dark, her voice low but carrying, the way it did when she told stories of Dad to me as a child. Every day, checked the mailbox, set the extra plate, laid the daisies. Dad's voice cracked behind her. "I know." "I stopped writing because they said you were dead," she continued, turning now, her eyes, Dad's gray eyes, raw and fierce in the porch light. "The army said no point, said he was gone. I believed them." "I know." "I buried you." Silence fell heavy, the crickets suddenly loud. Mom turned fully, her face a mask of grief and anger. "You wrote these?" Dad nodded, tears streaming. "Every month, for years, even after Clara, even after the girls." Mom picked up another letter, opened it slow, her fingers tracing the words like they were braille. "Dear Ruth, found a town in Virginia, asked around, No Carvers. I'm still looking. Tell Tommy her dad loves her. She folded it careful, picked up another. Dear Ruth, heard a rumor in Texas. Drove all night. Wrong family. I'm tired, but I won't stop. Another. Dear Ruth, it's been 5 years. The girls ask about their big brother. I tell them stories about Tommy. I miss you. Mom's hands shook harder. She dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor like a dead bird in the lamplight. Clara knelt, picked it up gentle, handed it back. Mom didn't take it. You have girls, she said, looking at Emily and Sarah, seeing Dad's features in their young faces, the blue eyes, the stubborn chin. Dad nodded. Emily, Sarah. Mom's voice broke, a sob escaping. My granddaughters. Emily nodded shy. Sarah hugged her sudden arm strong around Mom's waist. Mom let her, but her body was stiff, like she was afraid to feel too much. Dad stood, took a step closer. Ruth, I never stopped. Stop! She backed away down the steps, into the yard where the grass was cool underfoot. I followed. Mom! She spun, eyes wild like a trapped animal in the headlights. Don't. I buried you, she whispered, clutching her chest. I said goodbye. I lived goodbye for 27 years. I know. You lived. She looked at the house, at Clara standing in the door with kind eyes, at the girls peeking out. You lived without me. Dad came down the steps, slow, his voice breaking. I thought you were gone. The trail. You thought wrong. Mom's laugh was bitter, echoing in the night. Gone? I was here, raising Tommy, keeping your memory alive, setting an extra plate every night until it became a habit I couldn't break. Dad's face crumpled, tears falling free. I didn't know. Mom's tears came again, not soft, but ragged, angry, the kind that come from a place deep and dark. I wore black for a year. I stopped wearing your ring after 5. I taught Tommy to say Daddy's in heaven when he asked why the chair was empty. She clutched her chest harder, like her heart might stop. I carried on. Dad reached for her, his hand trembling in the air between them. She slapped it away, the sound sharp in the quiet. Don't touch me. Clara stepped forward from the porch, her voice soft but steady. Ruth, please, come inside. It's late. And the girls. Mom looked at her, really looked for the first time, seeing the woman who'd given Dad a second life, who'd raised his daughters, who stood there with tears in her eyes, but strength in her spine. You're his wife. Clara nodded, voice gentle. For 20 years. Mom's voice was small now, almost lost in the crickets. You love him. Yes. Mom looked at Dad, the man she'd loved and lost and found again. And you love her. Dad's silence was answer enough, heavy as the night. Mom's knees buckled a third time. I caught her, eased her to the grass, where the hibiscus petals were soft and cool. We sat there, the 3 of us in the yard, the girls watching from the porch, with Emily crying quiet and Sarah holding Clara tight. Dad knelt, his old knees creaking. Ruth, I never stopped loving you. You were my first, my always. Mom's laugh was broken, a sound like glass shattering slow. You stopped looking. I thought. You thought wrong. She stood, wobbled, but pushed my hand away when I tried to help. I need to go home. I helped her to the car anyway, her steps slow, the gravel crunching under our shoes. She didn't look back at Dad calling her name, his voice breaking on the porch. I drove north, Mom in the passenger seat, silent as the miles, the letters in the shoebox on the back seat. Clara had insisted I take them. Florida blurred past, then Georgia, the night deep and dark. Hours of silence, the radio off, the only sound the engine and Mom's occasional sigh. Then, in a motel in Georgia with neon buzzing outside the window. I can't do this, Tommy. I know. I buried him. I know. We stopped, the room small and musty, Mom going to bed without dinner, her light flicking off like a door slamming on the past. I sat outside on the plastic chair, letters in my lap, reading one under the motel light. Dear Ruth, the girls ask about you. I tell them you're an angel. I miss you. I cried quiet. Mom's light stayed off. The next morning, she was up early, coffee made in the tiny pot, eyes red but chin high. We're going home, she said, voice steady. Mom? No. She packed fast, didn't look at me, her movement sharp like she was cutting ties. We drove north, silence thick as the heat. Ohio by nightfall, the red mailbox waiting like it had never left. Home, the maple tree. Mom went inside straight to her room, the door closing soft but final. I followed after a minute. She opened the cedar box on her dresser, the one that hadn't been touched in years, took out the telegram, held it like it was fragile, then the shoebox of letters. One by one she read them in the lamplight, her face a mask of grief and wonder. Days passed in that room. She didn't leave. I brought soup, toast, coffee. She ate little. Susan called from home. Tommy, what's wrong? The kids miss you. I couldn't answer, the phone heavy in my hand. Mom's grief was silent now, deep as the ocean we'd left behind, endless as the road I'd driven. She'd buried Dad once, in an empty coffin with a folded flag and words over nothing. Now she had to bury him again, or forgive him for living without her. The letters sat on her bed, Dad's words spilling out like ghosts in the quiet. Dad's love, returned unread for 27 years. And Mom's heart, broken twice, was trying to decide if it could beat for him again. The clock ticked in the hall, the house quiet, too quiet. The red mailbox outside waited in the dark, and Mom's silence was louder than any scream, a grief that swallowed the light. What happens when a wife meets the husband she buried and realizes the grave was never empty, but the life he lived was full without her? The healing or the breaking was just beginning, slow and painful, as dawn after the longest night. 1979. Cancer. The word hit like a third telegram, cold and final, merciless in its simplicity. Dad called me from Florida on a Tuesday, the same day the original letter had arrived 7 years earlier, his voice thin and raspy, like paper tearing in the wind, each word a struggle that made my heart clench. Tommy boy, he rasped, the nickname from my childhood bringing tears instant. It's time. The doc says weeks, maybe days, but there's something you need to know before I go. I was on the next flight south, the plane bumping through clouds that looked like the storms of my childhood. Susan stayed home with Lisa and Tommy the Third. They were teenagers now, old enough to understand death, but too young for this kind of goodbye. Their faces pale when I kissed them at the door. Mom refused to come, her voice steel over the phone. "She buried me once," Dad had said when I begged her. "Can't ask her to dig the grave again." The plane landed in Miami under a bruised sky, heat thick as syrup, even in the evening. I rented a car, hands shaking on the wheel, Dad's old road map folded in the passenger seat like a relic from a life I thought was gone. The letter, the original, was in my purse, creased from years of reading, the shoebox of returned letters in the trunk. Dad's voice from the void, traveling with me one last time. The White House with blue shutters looked smaller in the fading light, faded like Dad's voice on the phone. The hibiscus bushes drooped in the heat, petals falling like tears. Clara met me at the door, eyes red and swollen, face drawn from nights of watching. She hugged me tight, like I was the last piece of Dad she had left to hold. "He's in the back room," she whispered, voice breaking on every word. "Hospice bed. He waited for you, Tommy. He's been asking." Emily, 23 now, engaged, her ring glinting in the hall light, hugged me next, her embrace fierce. Sarah, 21, home from college, cried into my shoulder, her tears hot on my neck. The room smelled like antiseptic and salt air, the ocean breeze sneaking through the open window. Dad lay in the bed, thin as a rail, skin yellowed like old parchment, eyes sunken deep into his skull. Tubes snaked from his arms to machines that beeped slow and steady, a rhythm that said, "Not long now." But when he saw me, he smiled. Same slanted smile from the porch swing 7 years ago, the one that said, "I'm home, weak but real." "Tommy." I sat on the edge of the bed, took his hand. It was cold, bony, like holding a bird with a broken wing, but his grip was surprisingly strong. "I'm here, Daddy." He nodded, eyes bright despite the pain, weak but alive in that moment. We talked, or I did mostly, my voice filling the room with stories to keep the silence at bay. About Lisa's wedding last spring, how she wore Mom's veil and looked like an angel. Tommy the Third's first job at the mill, same as me, coming home with grease on his hands and a grin wide as Dad's used to be. Mom's garden, how the maple finally died last winter, struck by lightning in a storm that lit the sky like the 4th of July. He listened, squeezed my hand when I cried, smiled at the happy parts, his eyes closing slow when the pain meds kicked in. Night fell outside, the ocean whispering in the distance. Clara brought soup, chicken noodle, Dad's favorite from when the girls were little. He didn't eat, just sipped water through a straw, his hand trembling. I pulled out the letter, the original, the one that started it all. "Want me to read it?" I asked, voice soft. He nodded, eyes closing. I did, my voice cracking on every line. "Dear Ruth and Tommy, if this ever finds you, know I tried. The camp was hell. We escaped in 44. I hid in barns, stole bread, walked at night. I wrote this from a Red Cross truck headed to the coast. I was coming home. Then the truck was hit. I woke up in a field hospital with no ID. They said I was John Doe. By the time I remembered my name, the war was over and you were gone. I looked. God help me, I looked. But the trail went cold. I started over. I'm sorry. Tell Tommy I tried. Love always, Dad." His eyes closed fully. Tears leaked down his temples into the pillow. "I tried," he whispered, voice barely air. "I know." The girls came in then, Emily and Sarah, sitting on the bed like they did when they were little, and Dad read them stories. "Emily, tell us about Grandma Ruth again." I did, my voice steady for them, about the biscuits, golden and fluffy, the bingo nights with her lucky dauber, the daisies on the empty grave every Memorial Day, how she hummed How Great Thou Art, off key but fierce, like she was daring the world to take one more thing from her. Sarah cried, quiet, held Dad's other hand. Clara stood in the door, silent but strong, her hand on the frame like it was holding her up through the storm. Dad's breathing slowed, ragged and shallow, the monitor beeping a rhythm that said, "Not long." Then he gripped my hand hard, sudden, eyes wide and urgent despite the pain. "Tommy, the box." "What box?" I leaned closer, his breath warm on my face. "Under the bed. Clara, show him." Clara's face paled, her eyes flicking to the bed like she knew but didn't want to. She knelt slow, pulled out a metal lockbox, rusty and heavy, padlocked tight. Dad's voice was a rasp, barely audible. "Key! Around my neck!" Clara's hands shook as she lifted the chain from under his gown. The key glinted in the lamplight. She unlocked it, the click loud in the quiet room. Inside, a stack of letters, hundreds, tied with twine, all to Ruth Carver, all returned. A medal, Purple Heart, Dad's, polished like new. A photo, Dad in uniform, young, smiling. On the back, "For Ruth if I don't make it." But the real shock, a second photo, Dad, Clara, the girls as toddlers, and a boy, teenager, dark hair, Dad's eyes, Dad's chin. Clara gasped, hand to her mouth. "Ben?" Dad's voice was barely air, his eyes pleading. "My son, from before, Ruth's." My world stopped, the room spinning slow. Mom was pregnant when Dad died. She never told me, thought it was the stress, the grief, a miscarriage she buried with everything else. Dad looked at me, eyes fading but urgent. "Find him. Tell him I tried." His grip weakened, fingers slipping. The monitor beeped. Slow. Slower. Clara sobbed, falling to her knees. The girls clung to him, confused and terrified, their cries filling the room. I held his hand tight. "Dad, promise." "I promise." He smiled, weak but real, closed his eyes. The beep flatlined. Dad was gone. For real this time. We buried him 3 days later under a palm tree, the ceremony small and quiet, the ocean whispering in the background. Clara, Emily, Sarah, me, no Mom. I flew home with the lockbox, Dad's last secret burning a hole in my lap, the plane bumping through clouds that looked like tears. Mom met me at the door, eyes red from crying or not sleeping. I couldn't tell. She knew. From my face, from the silence on the phone when I called to say I was coming. I handed her the original letter, the one I'd read to him at the end. She took it, sat at the table where we'd shared so many meals and silences, read it slow, cried. Then I opened the lockbox, the rusty lid creaking like Dad's voice in my memory. Showed her the photo. The boy. Her hand flew to her mouth, a sound escaping that was half sob, half gasp. "Ben!" I nodded, tears spilling. Mom's face crumpled, the steel cracking wide. "I thought he died. Miscarriage, after the telegram, the stress. The doctor said the baby was gone." Dad never knew. The boy, my brother, was alive. Somewhere. Mom whispered, voice breaking like glass. "Find him." I nodded, the promise to Dad burning in my chest. The clock ticked in the hall, the house quiet, too quiet. Dad was gone. But his love, the letters, The trying, the son he never knew, lived on. The red mailbox outside waited in the dark, silent. But this time it wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, a brother, a secret, a promise. I was going to find him, even if it broke me, even if it broke us all. The photo stared up at me from the table, Dad's eyes in a boy's face, young and unknown. Who was he? Where was he? And what happens when a mother meets the son she thought she lost? 33 years ago, the child she mourned before she mourned his father. The lockbox sat open, letters spilling like ghosts in the lamplight. The war wasn't over. It had just changed battlefields, and the next fight was for family. The phone rang sudden, unknown number cutting the silence. I answered, heart in my throat. A man's voice, deep, familiar in a way that chilled me. Tommy, it's your brother. The line crackled, and the world tilted, the floor falling away. The phone line crackled like a storm coming through the wires. I stood in the kitchen, the lockbox open on the table, Dad's purple heart glinting under the lamp like a silent accusation from beyond the grave. Mom sat frozen beside me, the photo of the boy, my brother, clutched in her trembling hands, her knuckles white as the porcelain sink behind her where I'd rinsed so many coffee cups over the years. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, each second a hammer on my nerves, echoing the heartbeat I'd felt when Dad took his last breath in that Florida room. Tommy, the voice said again, deep and hesitant, laced with something I couldn't name, fear maybe, or the hope of a lifetime alone. It's your brother. My knees buckled the same way they had when the yellow envelope arrived. I grabbed the counter, the wood cool under my palm, the room spinning slow like the world had tilted on its axis again. Mom's eyes locked on mine, wide and wild, like she was seeing a ghost rise from the cedar box upstairs where the telegram still slept. Who is this? My voice cracked like thin ice on the old pond behind the house, the one Dad used to take me fishing. A pause on the line, breath heavy and ragged, like the caller was holding back a sob. Name's Jack. Jack Carver. I got a letter from a lawyer in Florida. Said my dad died. Benjamin Carver said I had a brother, Tommy, and a mom, Ruth. Mom's hand flew to her mouth, a small broken sound escaping like air from a punctured tire. I sank into the chair, legs gone, the oak creaking under me the way it did when Dad carved his initials all those years ago. The letter from Dad's lawyer, Clara had mentioned it in passing at the funeral, but I'd been too lost in grief to press, too numb to ask. Now, it hit like a freight train roaring through the quiet night. Jack, I whispered, the name foreign on my tongue, but right in my heart. Where are you? Ohio, small town outside Dayton. I think I'm your brother. Mom stood slow, like the floor might give way beneath her, and walked to me, her slippers soft on the linoleum. She took the phone with shaking fingers, her eyes never leaving mine. Her voice was steel under the tears, the same steel that had carried her through 27 years of mourning. Jack? Silence on the line. Then, Mom? His voice broke on the word like a boy lost in the dark finally seeing light. Mom's knees buckled. I caught her, eased her into the chair beside me, her body light but heavy with the weight of loss and life. I thought you died, she whispered, tears spilling free now, her free hand clutching the photo. Miscarriage, After the telegram, the stress, the doctor said the baby was gone, and I believed him. Jack's voice shook, words tumbling out. I was born early. Hospital mix-up. They told my adoptive parents my mom died in childbirth, never knew my dad. Grew up thinking I was alone, bouncing foster homes till I was 16. Mom's sobs filled the kitchen, soft at first, then ragged, endless, the sound of a heart mending and breaking at the same time. I took the phone back, my own tears falling. Jack, how old are you? 33. Born 1946, after the telegram, before Mom moved us and changed our name to Carter to escape the pity. Mom whispered, my boy, touching the photo, Dad's eyes and Jack's face, the features she'd mourned in a miscarriage now alive on the other end of the line. I opened the lockbox again, the rusty lid creaking like Dad's voice in my memory, found a final envelope sealed, my name on it in Dad's handwriting, the slanted cursive that started this all. I tore it open slow, my fingers trembling. Tommy, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I found him. Jack, your brother, Ruth's son. I never knew until last year. VA records, a hunch, a private eye I hired with my savings. He's alive, in Ohio. I set up a trust. For all my kids, Jack, you, Emily, Sarah, tell Ruth I tried. Tell Jack I'm sorry I wasn't there. Tell the girls their big brother is the best thing I ever did. Love always, Dad. Mom read it over my shoulder, her hand flying to her heart, a gasp escaping. He knew, she whispered, voice thick. All this time he knew and never said. I looked at the trust papers clipped to the letter, numbers big and real. Dad's life insurance, savings, the Florida house, split 4 ways fair. Jack's voice on the phone, shaky but clear. The lawyer said Dad looked for me for years, left everything to his kids, said there's a trust for me, for you, for the girls in Florida. Mom's tears stopped sudden, her chin lifting, steel again, the way it did the morning after the telegram. Bring him home, she said, voice firm. I nodded, throat tight. Jack, come to Ohio, tomorrow. He hesitated, the line crackling. I have a family, wife, 2 kids. Bring them, I said, smiling through tears. Silence. Okay. The line went dead, the kitchen suddenly too quiet. Mom stared at the photo, touched Jack's face, smooth, young, Dad's eyes staring back like a promise kept. My boy, she whispered again, louder this time, the word filling the room. I closed the lockbox, the purple heart inside catching the light one last time. The letters, Dad's last secret. The clock ticked past 1, the house quiet but not empty anymore. Jack was coming. My brother, Mom's son, Dad's legacy. The red mailbox outside waited in the dark, silent. But this time, it wasn't a bomb. It was a bridge to family, to healing, to the boy Mom thought she lost in the shadow of a telegram. The photo sat on the table between us. Jack's face, Dad's eyes. Tomorrow, he'd walk through the door with his wife and kids, my nieces and nephews I'd never met. Mom stood, walked to the cedar box on her dresser, opened it slow, took out the telegram, held it like it was fragile glass. Then the shoebox of letters from Florida. She read one under the lamp, her face a mix of grief and wonder. Another. Dad's voice from the grave returned unread for 27 years. She folded them neat, put them in the box with the telegram, closed it gentle. I forgave him, she said, voice steady. I hugged her, our tears mixing. The clock ticked, the house quiet. Dad was gone. But his love, the letters, the trying, the son he never knew, lived on in us. In the girls in Florida, in Lisa and Tommy the Third, in Jack. The extra plate I still set every night. The war was over, but the reunion was just beginning. And the secrets, they weren't done. Dad's trust, the money, the girls in Florida. What happens when a family scattered by war comes together for the first time, pieces fitting after 33 years apart? The clock ticked, the lockbox waited on the table, and the road north was calling Jack home, his car already packed, his family in tow. The phone rang again, unknown number cutting the silence like a knife. I answered, heart in my throat. Jack's voice, shaky, urgent. Tommy, there's something else. The lawyer said Dad left a safe deposit box, keys with the trust papers, said only you can open it. My heart stopped, the room tilting. What's in it? Don't know, but he said it's for Ruth if she's ready. Mom's eyes met mine across the table, the cedar box, the telegram, the letters. Dad's voice from beyond the grave, one more time, one more secret. The clock ticked, the night deep and still, and the safe deposit box waited in the bank, locked tight. What was Dad hiding? Forgiveness? Or something that could break us all over again just when we'd started to mend? The red mailbox outside stood silent in the dark, but the storm was coming, slow and sure. The safe deposit box opened like a whisper in the quiet bank vault. Key in my hand, cold and heavy. Mom beside me, her hand on my arm for support. Jack across the table, tall, dark hair, Dad's eyes staring back with a mix of wonder and fear that mirrored my own. His wife, Laura, held their kids. Ben, 8, Ruthie, 6, close on the bench, the little ones coloring quietly with crayons from home. Emily and Sarah had flown in from Florida, sitting with Clara on the other side, the whole family crowded in the small room for the first time, the air thick with anticipation and the smell of old paper. The bank vault had smelled like metal and secrets, the clerk leading us down the hall with keys jangling, the box, Dad's name etched on the plate, waited like it had been holding its breath for years. I turned the key slow, the click loud in the silence. The lid lifted, revealing more than I expected. Inside, a stack of letters, more returned, tied with faded ribbon, the stamps addressee unknown in red. A journal, Dad's, leather-bound, pages yellowed but filled with his slanted cursive, entries from the camp to the last days. And a small wooden box carved with BC plus RC, the initials worn smooth from handling. Mom's breath caught, her hand flying to her heart. We took it home in silence, the box on my lap the whole drive, the family following in Jack's car. The living room was packed tight when we arrived, kids on the floor with their coloring books, adults in a circle on chairs and the couch, the air thick with the smell of Mom's fresh coffee and the weight of what was coming. I opened the wooden box slow, the lid creaking like the porch swing in Florida. Inside, Dad's dog tags, polished to a shine, the chain tangled but intact. A photo, Dad and Mom, young, arms around each other at a county fair, cotton candy in hand, smiles wide as the sky. On the back, in Dad's handwriting, Forever Ben, and a final letter sealed, the envelope yellowed but intact. For my family. Mom took it with hands that didn't shake anymore, the steel back in her spine. Opened it slow, her fingers careful, like the paper might crumble. My loves, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I tried. God help me, I tried. The camp, the escape, the years lost. I'd do it all again for one more day with you. Ruth, you were my North Star, guiding me even when I was lost. Tommy, my brave boy, the one who found me when I couldn't find myself. Jack, my son I never held but loved from afar. Emily, Sarah, my Florida miracles, the light in my second chance. The trust is for you all, equal shares, no favorites, because you're all my heart. Live well, love hard, forgive easy. Tell stories around the table, keep the extra plate. It's for family always. I'm home now with the stars. Love always, Dad Ben. Mom read it aloud, her voice cracking on the hard parts but strong through the love, the words filling the room like Dad was there speaking them himself. We cried, all of us, tears of loss and joy mixing, hugs passing around like the sweet tea Clara poured. Jack held the dog tags, turning them in his fingers. They're warm, he whispered, like they still held Dad's heat. Ben, the boy, touched them, curious. Grandpa? Jack nodded, eyes wet. Ruthie hugged Mom tight. Gamma? Mom smiled, real and wide, the first since Florida. Yes, baby, always. Emily and Sarah read the journal together, their heads close, Dad's words from the camp bringing tears and laughs, the escape stories, the search, the hope that never died. Clara held Mom's hand across the circle. He never stopped loving you. Mom nodded, squeezing back. I know, and I never stopped either. The afternoon faded into evening, the light slanting gold through the windows. We ate. Mom's biscuits, fluffy and golden, Clara's sweet tea, cold and perfect. Stories flowed like the tea. Jack telling about growing up in Dayton, foster homes and finding Laura, having kids and naming them after family he never knew he had. Mom listened, touched his face gentle, tracing the lines that were Dad's. My boy, she whispered over and over. Night came, the kids asleep on the couch under blankets. We sat on the porch, the swing creaking under us like it did in Florida. Stars out, the North Star bright as ever. Mom whispered, He's home. I nodded, tears quiet. Jack, what now? Mom smiled, the steel soft now. We carry on. Together? We did. Years passed in a blur of visits and holidays. Jack moved closer to Ohio, his family blending with ours. The kids grew, Lisa and Tommy the Third meeting their uncle, nieces, nephews. Emily and Sarah visited every summer, the house full of laughter and stories. The extra plate stayed set, a tradition now for whoever walked through the door. Mom passed in 85, peaceful in her sleep, a smile on her face like she was dreaming of Dad. I read Dad's final letter at her funeral, the family together under the maple's replacement, a young oak Susan planted, whole. The red mailbox still stood at the end of the drive, paint peeled but strong, deliveries of birthday cards and grandkid photos now. I kept the letters, the journal, the dog tags in a shadow box on the wall. Read them to the grandkids on quiet nights, their eyes wide at Grandpa's adventures, Dad's legacy, love, forgiveness, family. But one night, years later, when the grandkids were asleep, the phone rang in the quiet house. Unknown number. A voice, Old, raspy, familiar in a way that chilled me. Tommy, it's the VA. We found something, another letter, from your dad, postmarked 1945. Never delivered. My heart stopped, the room tilting like it did the first time. What does it say? Silence on the line, heavy. You need to come in. I drove to the VA the next day, the envelope waiting on the desk, yellowed, postmarked 1945. Dad's handwriting clear. I opened it slow, hand shaking, one line. Ruth, if you read this, I'm coming home, for good. Postmarked the day before the truck was hit. He never made it, but he tried. One last time, I took the letter home, showed Mom. No, she was gone. The family was whole. I stood at the kitchen sink, the same one from 1972, the letter in my hand. I lit a match from the stove, watched it burn. The secret, Dad's final try, gone in flames. Some things are better left unsaid. The ashes fell into the sink. The red mailbox waited outside, silent. The North Star blinked, and the legacy lived on, peaceful, whole. What was in the last letter? Only the flames knew, and they kept the secret. Well, that's the last page of this one, but the attic's still full of more old stories. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Drop your own old-timer tale in the comments. I read every one. Until the next story, keep the past alive. See you on the porch.